Episode number 7.
There was a period of time where every self-appointed guru was, saying every CEO should be on Twitter. And what you realize is that the channels reward different personality types and different communication styles.
Welcome to the Be Real Show with Travis Too Tall and Huff, where we talk about solutions, tips, and tricks for social marketers and businesses.
Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to the Be Real Show with Travis Too Tall and Huff. And I hope you guys are ready because I have a guy on the phone that is going to change the way you think about your audience. On the line, I have my man, Jeffery K. Rohrs.
Hey.
Jeffery, are you ready to be real?
I am ready.
Jeffery is the author of Audience Pro, and he is also the VP of Marketing Insights at Salesforce.com. Jeffery, we've given the listeners just a little bit about you, but tell us a little more, my man.
Yeah, so I head up the Marketing Insights team at Salesforce. I was part of the ExactTarget acquisition, and I've been with Salesforce/ExactTarget for the past 8 years. Prior to that, I was president of an agency in Cleveland, Ohio, where I'm based, by the name of Optium. Worked with clients like Sherwin-Williams and Insurance.com and Calphalon. And going even further back, I'm actually a recovering attorney. So by degree, I got my law degree, practiced for a few years, and realized in the mid-90s, as today, being a litigator is reliving the worst moments of other people's lives. And that is not how I wanted to live mine. I have some friends who are very capable litigators and can do that. But I was much more of kind of a creative communicator. And so carved my path away from the law through LexisNexis, where I worked for a few years, and then another agency before joining Optium, and then ExactTarget, and now with the acquisition, Salesforce.com. And as you mentioned, my first book, Audience, Marketing in the Age of Subscribers, Fans, and Followers, came out about 16 months ago, and I've been touring the globe speaking to the ideas contained in that book for the last year or more. So been a lot of fun.
Awesome. I really appreciate your passion and energy for the industry, and knowing that point where, at the end of the day, if you have to do this every day, it's got to be something you love. And you made that decision in your path and your career to go towards content and creativity instead of maybe, doing something that you could have done, really good job at, but now maybe you have that extra passion every day that you live with.
Well, it's interesting that you raise that, because I think as I get older, I recognize that, life is not a single career path. It's a series of career changes and choices. And those reflect both what your passions are, but what perhaps your needs are at the moment, as well as the fact that, change is really kind of the only constant. And so, when I figured that out, in law school, I knew I needed to practice because I was a little ahead of the curve in terms of graduating with 6 figures of debt. Now it's, passe. Way too many students are doing it. But back in the early 90s, that was kind of an anomaly. And, that kind of fiscal pressure puts, decisions in a pretty interesting focus, right? You've got to go and pay the bills. And once you got to a point where, the bills are paid, but, you're not satisfied, you're not feeling like you're doing the right thing, you have to be willing to kind of leap sometimes without a net. And as they say, kind of build it on the way down. And fortunately, I had some good decisions in my career, some of them by my own hands, some of them made for me, and was able to get on a path that put me on stuff that really, I've been passionate about, from content marketing to, this concept of audience development, and have gotten to work with really great people and brands along the way.
What a dream. What a dream. It's the reality. I mean, at the end of the day, we all have to pay our bills, but if you can live and pay your bills and then do something you love and dream about, that's the ultimate. And I love what you're saying here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the challenges to writing, because I'm curious about that myself.
Sure.
But then we're going to start with a Be Real story. We're going to start with the moment, tell us a time where you feel like you failed at social marketing.
It's interesting when you sent over, some of the questions that you ask. I was really kind of struggling with that one, not because I've, hit a ton of home runs, but rather I think some of the failures in social media are very silent It's that you don't have amplification, that you don't have the kind of pickup that you wish you had. And I think there have been a number of times in my career where, I poured my heart and soul into a piece of content, being it an article or a white paper or some event or some session or keynote. And, it was met with deafening silence. That in many ways is kind of the biggest failure you can have in social media, because you're seeking, this positive amplification. Everybody aspires to quote unquote go viral. And the truth is that, publication is not distribution. Publication is not social media success. And, that's really where kind of some of the themes of my book come together, because we've got to be thinking about, how do you get that audience energized? How do you get them there to respond? And so, as I think about some of the things I've done, it's usually been because if you would cast them in terms of failures, it's usually because I didn't put enough energy into thinking about distribution. I put way too much into thinking about the actual content creation.
So true. It's the hustle and flow of it all. I mean, it's so easy to say, write a blog or do a music video and it's going to go viral, but it's the after, it's the distribution. Like you said, it's the push, it's the actual, legwork, and that takes social networking to the next level. And I believe that the biggest thing for all content creators out there and social marketers is don't be frustrated when one piece of content doesn't go viral. Right. Because, another 50 blogs from now could go viral, and then people are all of a sudden reading all your old blogs. And, just like music videos, you get a huge music video success, and all of a sudden they're becoming fans of all this old catalog of music that the artist never had the opportunity to showcase. And it's one of those things you just got to keep pushing. You got to keep, realizing that it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not meant to be.
Absolutely. And you raise the flip side of the coin. As I reflect on what's been a great social media success, one of the things I was proudest of during my tenure at ExactTarget was our subscribers, fans, and followers research series, which I co-created with a then colleague of mine, Morgan Stewart, who's now hung out his own shingle and has a great company, Trendline Interactive, that he's CEO of. And he and I looked at this and said, we've got some great research. We're doing consumer research to understand the changing nature and relationship of consumers with brands through the variety of social media that were springing up 5, 6, 7 years ago. Things that are second nature to us now, like, Facebook and Twitter, but also looking at email and looking at mobility and how it influenced it. And our epiphany was that we were sitting on a data set that was much bigger than a white paper or 2 white papers. It was really a series. And that got us thinking, well, we need to brand this. And then we pushed to, make it a numerical series. So here's subscribers, fans, and followers research report number 1. Here's SFF number 2. Here's 3. And each of them had their own title, and they're really stylistic. And any of your listeners can still download them for free at ExactTarget.com/SFF. And you can see that by having a series that was numerical, it did exactly what you're saying, right? You're dropped into the middle of the series. You're reading number 13. You're like, wow, I really like this. What were the prior 12 like? What do they have coming out in the future? And it's interesting. We've kind of sunset that series now, and I'm beginning to percolate on kind of what is the next thing. What does the next success story look like for us? But that whole notion of serializing content, really does draw from television, radio, helping your audience understand this is not just a standalone piece of content. This is part of an ongoing, valuable set of content that could help you, do whatever. It could help you be entertained. It can help you in your business. It can help you with your marketing, what have you. But it lets you know that it's not the only thing. And so in that way, it kind of markets itself and the future and the past of the series.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying about the series too, because at the end of the day, if you have something that's a theme or a topic, they know what the theme and topic is, and they can go, fast forward, they can go back and look at what, which ones are, past, podcasts, blogs, videos, any content that you create, infographics that, you maybe didn't get as much love on. And you have to really keep pushing and feeling that energy to just keep creating. It's one of those worlds that you just can't be disappointed when you have a failed blog after you spent that kind of energy and effort. And I love what you're saying just about the fact that, it's amazing what happens for a business and the influence that happens around creating a really quality series of content.
Well, and what you're hitting upon is really what motivated, part of the reason I wrote the book. It's that marketers are sitting there shaking their heads saying, gosh, I got this great thing and it just didn't have the results that I wanted. And as I talked to marketers, I found this hole in their marketing strategies, and it was audience. They were assuming an audience that wasn't there. I call it audience assumption disorder. And again, it's because we think our content is so magnetic that people are going to be drawn to it. But if we aren't building into the structure of our content marketing, of our social media marketing, acquisition of audience for the future, then what we're doing is we're reinventing the wheel every time we go out. We're having to find a new audience with each new piece of content, as opposed to if we have a very strong, well thought through 360-degree acquisition methodology. We're making sure that A, we're getting the email address when somebody downloads something. B, we're giving them ample and appropriate opportunities to amplify this content via Twitter, via Facebook, via whatever channel they choose. C, when that is amplified, we're making sure that the pages that these new prospects or these new folks who are coming to the content are similarly given opportunities to opt in through the channels that are of mutual benefit. And that's the key message I have, is that in this environment, it's not enough to just sell. It's not enough to just create content. It's not enough to just brand. We also have got to be thinking about, how do I get a bigger, richer, more engaged, more valuable audience with each thing that I put into the marketplace. So I call it, the downhill snowball effect, right? With each new piece of content, with each social media effort that I have, I want a bigger audience than what I started with. And I want to be cognizant of the fact, though, there is natural turnover in every single one of the direct channels that I work with. People are going to unfollow me. They're going to unfriend me. They're going to, they're going to dislike. They're going to unsubscribe. That's a natural part of it. People's lives change. But that means I have to have a really strong acquisition process to replace that natural churn. And again, that is, I think, very important. And I drew a lot of those theories from my own background. One of the things I didn't mention is I was a DJ at a commercial alternative station in the late 80s, early 90s during my college years. And, got to interview bands. And I remember being backstage with 9 Inch Nails when they opened for Peter Murphy, and talking with Trent Reznor, and just being fascinated by that world. But you saw, these bands understood that with every tour, they needed to gain more fans. So the next time they were playing bigger arenas, and maybe they were headlining, and they had a better hotel, and there were tangible benefits to having a bigger audience. With some of the brands today, we get complacent because, our brand's established, we're going to have the set audience, and the advertising team's got a big budget, they can go pay and get us more audience. That's a problem. You've got to get out of that mindset. You've got to make your advertising do more for you, and you have to make yourself less dependent on it, so that you've got this direct audience you can reach out to. It's growing, and then your paid advertising helps you go to new places and go further than you would have in the absence of those direct proprietary audiences.
Yep. I completely love what you're saying about email too, because I think that there's such a power between the content and then email and social that you will evolve. You will have unsubscribers, but if you're looking at your content and you're not building your lists, of your email databases, and I like to personalize it as much as possible. So I even take a list and personally send emails to that list, and I told someone recently, I said, the most effective, email newsletter you can do is to send a personal email.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to remember, it's interesting because when you get into larger companies and they start referring to it as a list or a database, it depersonalizes it, right? But what you recognize is behind each one of those email addresses, behind each Twitter handle, there's a human being. And that human being has connected with your brand for some purpose that they're seeking to get served for themselves. It's not that they're serving you, it's vice versa. And so, when you think of these audiences, you want to think of the individual, and ultimately and aspirationally, the reason you're building these audiences, and especially email, is to build a foundation where you can truly have a one-to-one relationship at scale, thanks to the technologies that exist today. This is the promise that Peppers and Rogers wrote about 20 years ago in the one-to-one future. That email address is the cornerstone of that, because now I can begin to map individually identifiable information with permission, with behavior, with predictive intelligence and other things, and begin to serve that person more like an individual through automation. But then to your point, to reach out to them as an individual and realize, God, this is like an amazing focus group. This is an amazing brand loyalist group. And that as a marketer, I want to reach out to some of these folks probably as a human being once in a while and get their thoughts. And people have done that, certainly through Facebook, right? That's kind of become the water cooler for a lot of brands. But I think you're right. I think that's a good strategy to every once in a while dip into that email group and surprise and delight. You obviously can't do everybody with that kind of human touch.
Sure,
but,
absolutely.
You certainly can dip in and use it for your purposes to, assess as a campaign great or get feedback or reward folks. But what most brands are trying to do is bring that humanity at scale through the new technologies, and email is really that, as I said, it's that cornerstone upon which true customer relationship management and communication and one-to-one communication is built.
And the best thing about email, and this is the last thing I'll say, even though I'm a huge believer of social media, and social media is the future for all new, ways to market, advertise, customer service, HR, the list goes down, donating, nonprofits. But I believe if you have an email list, you control that. Unlike if you have 1 million followers on Facebook, they control that network. They can control how, many people it reaches. Obviously, we've seen that over the 3+ years here, that it's slowly declined the reach organically, where you're being forced to pay more for, your content on Facebook to be seen. And, the email list, you control that whole entire database. It's yours. That until, everyone decides to unfollow you, if you keep that unfollow rate versus like you were talking about, your new acquisition rate, it'll allow you to just continue to build your audience, and they're yours.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because, one thing I want to emphasize to your listeners is, no audience is owned. I don't care if you're a musician, a priest, a marketer, a brand. The audience can leave at any time. That's true of physical audiences. That's true of digital audiences, right?
Absolutely.
So we're constantly earning their attention. Attention is the currency and actually the fundamental unit of energy for every single brand. That's what we're seeking to do. When we aggregate an audience, we're trying to aggregate attention, convert that attention into positive actions, hopefully sales for our brand. Now that all said, what's interesting is in this digital age, in this marketing age, we have more ways to create direct relationships and therefore audiences, proprietary audiences, not owned, but proprietary, meaning that I have an exclusive right to communicate with this group of subscribers because I built this, right? It's the little red hen thing, right? I did all the sowing and the planting. This is mine to harvest. But what you're talking about in terms of the changes like with Facebook is interesting, because a lot of folks have been really, kind of down on Facebook because of the decline in organic reach, which is really a victim of Facebook's own success, right? There's so many people posting things. There's only so much stuff they can put there. So at some point, they've got to make some sort of business call on what's valuable and how it gets, promoted. So naturally, they've said, hey, if you want to cut through the clutter, here's this advertising option. Where it gets interesting, though, is, and a lot of folks aren't really completely getting this concept, even though they might even be paying for this form of advertising, is Facebook has a product called, I believe it's Active Audiences. And we actually, through our social.com team, manage a lot of this under what we call custom audiences, essentially kind of the same thing, one's a managed approach, one's direct through Facebook. But what you can do is increase the efficacy, increase the performance of your paid advertising on Facebook by mapping your Facebook fans to your email subscribers. And when you do this, now okay, these are folks who are both fans and email subscribers. I don't want to, hit them over the head with an offer they're already receiving, or maybe I want to reinforce it. Or as we get more sophisticated, maybe I know this isn't just an email subscriber who's a fan. It's an email subscriber who's a fan who received an email selling this product and they responded positively. So there's no need for me to advertise to them any further. I want to upsell them on other things that complement the product they bought. But if they didn't buy it, then I do want to advertise to them. And then you've got this other group that are fans who aren't email subscribers. I want to advertise to them to become email subscribers, to exactly your point, to diversify my portfolio, right? Much like a financial manager, I'm spreading risk. So now I want to have email because I control cadence. And when I send the messages, and I can automate it, and I can hook that into my CRM system, and I can actually get a relationship with that person as opposed to building on Facebook SAN at 100%. And then the last piece is I can map the persona, right, of a person who's a Facebook fan and an email subscriber, that group who's loyal. I can say, find me people who look like this audience in this new market I'm expanding to, where I don't have any fans or any email subscribers. And now I can target them very, very selectively. That is extraordinarily powerful. And if you think about it in the abstract, this is the first time really in advertising history where you're not going to be able to buy a form of advertising unless you've built proprietary audiences, right? You've had to build your fans. You have to have built your email subscribers. And that's going to make your paid advertising through Facebook more effective, more targeted, and reach people with a higher chance of conversion at a lower cost per click or action. That's pretty powerful.
Wise words right here. I hope everyone is fired up right now and taking notes, because that last paragraph of content that we just gave you right now, that last 30 seconds of wisdom my man Jeffrey just shared with you is priceless. And it's so true. The custom audience, the lookalike audience, the capability you can do now on Facebook ads to really make your ads effective is unbelievable. And that's one of the most passionate reasons why I love Facebook personally, to be honest with you, is because it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of what they're really going to be serving us in 10 years, let's just say. As we started 6 years ago, things have drastically changed from when you used to be able to run these basic ads to what you can do now. Yep. And the future is really exciting for marketers and people that really are taking this passionate, but it's going to pass you by if you don't take it seriously today. And the wisdom you shared it just even gave me a gut check to myself to think, hey, you know what? We need to take this even more seriously, our own good, and make sure that email is one of those things that we seriously take up a priority on.
I couldn't agree more. And really that's been a message I've been carrying forward about email. It's been fascinating because when we started our subscribers, fans, and followers research series about 5 years ago, one of the motivating factors was social media was kind of in its infancy, and there were a lot of pundits and quote unquote gurus out there saying email is dead, social media is going to replace it. And a group of peers and I kept banging the drum saying that's just fool's talk. This isn't an us versus them. This is additive. And these things are so new, it's going to take time for the dust to settle and things to shake out. And here we are 5 years on. And, if you, do some Google searches, you'll discover, during the holiday season and Black Friday, what was the number one direct, messaging channel in terms of driving revenue for retailers? Oh, yeah, it was email. And it was number one by a far margin. And the attributable revenue to social media was actually, I think, in the single digits, whereas email was like 27%. And I share that not to cast aspersions or cast a negative light about social media, but rather to suggest, look, these are different things. They do different things. And our generation of marketers has a real challenge on our hands because we're literally like, bathing in the primordial ooze. All this stuff is mixing and mingling and figuring itself out, and we're having to still propel our brands forward. If we were to flash forward 5-10 years in the future, we would not only have more experience with these channels would have evolved more into kind of their permanent states, and consumers would have another decade of experience under their belts. That's a far different world. That's one where the dust is completely settled. And now it's much more like, say, using television advertising was, say, in the 70s or 80s. They'd had a couple of decades of using it to understand, this is what we do. Now, personally, I find it more exciting to be in this period of time because we're helping to shape what that future is. And we also have a new responsibility on our shoulders to think about our customers and putting them at the center of our businesses, to be customer centric and not just market for the sake of selling every single widget we possibly can. We're trying to build relationships so that we have the best lifetime value from that customer, and that sometimes might mean foregoing a sale right now because there's a greater opportunity on the horizon. But you'd only know that if you truly build the relationship and you have a deeper understanding of who this customer is. So it's a really interesting time to be a marketer. Kind of the best of times, worst of times kind of scenario in terms of the challenges you have. But that excites me. That's what motivates me, is to try and figure this stuff out.
So true. It's like, we're living in the wild, wild west, in a way, because there's so many unknowns and people developing things that are going to be released, in the coming weeks that we're going to have to get used to. And you know what I mean? It's just, it's ever evolving, and other companies are developing products or making them better. And it's just one of those things you have to just constantly keep yourself on the edge, keep updated, and really almost like, keep involved in the ever evolving part, because if you can't just have a Twitter account anymore. You have to understand what Twitter does. And you know what I mean? It's just, to have just a Twitter account because you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company doesn't make any sense unless you know what you want to do with it, unless you.
And I remember, there was a period of time where every, self-appointed guru was, saying every CEO should be on Twitter. And what you realize is that the channels reward different personality types and different communication styles. And so if you're a dollars and cents CEO, much more of, kind of a spreadsheet CEO, and introverted, Twitter probably isn't going to be the place for you. But Musk, and you understand who you are, and you're a futurist and a visionary, and you've got things to say and products to bring to market. God bless you. And I cite him in the book, he has leveraged that platform to extraordinary results, and used it to combat what he felt was misinformation from the traditional press. And that's incredible. That's an incredible value of social media that can't be measured in terms of sales. It can be measured maybe in more PR types of fashion, right? Influence, reach, and all
absolutely.
That. So, again, I think you have to, and hopefully we're now at the point where people aren't feeling quite the pressure to be doing every single form of social media. In fact, I've had this conversation with several people this year that have started dropping certain social networks from their own personal use. And that, again, is a sign of the evolution that we're recognizing, okay, yeah, I could continue to do all this stuff, but at some point I have to lead my real life over here. I can only manage so many things. What are the ones that are giving what I consider value? How do to my life? And I think that will continue.
Absolutely. I mean, as there's more and more evolving social networks, you want to take a part of all of them, but it's like at the end of the day, you only have so much time. And I truly don't believe in automating. I really think you need to be as authentic as possible. Maybe there's a little bit of automation in there on certain content or stuff like that throughout the platforms. But at the end of the day, it needs to be authentic to truly make the full benefit of the network. And so if you're spreading yourself thin on 20 different networks and you're, all over the place and doing a kind of a halfway job of any type of content creation on any of them, you're going to get what you get, and you're going to get really nothing from it.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things.
I think I would take issue though with the notion of automation being bad. I think we have to clarify, right? You're talking about it kind of in the individual sense, that there are an awful lot of people who are like automating posts and doing things
more like
future,
spamming.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, like spamming profiles with just spamming stuff. I definitely agree, with you, and I liked your insight a little more in automation. But I think more I'm talking about specifically, just a bunch of different posts, that are automatic or stuff that has nothing to do with you, because I think that turns off your Twitter followers. As you have new Twitter followers, I've even noticed that, and I've turned off some more of my automation because I felt that I wasn't staying authentic to why they're following me.
Yep.
And then also I hate it when it's just these personal, inbox messages that are just complete spam.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the stuff that
and this whole conversation is intriguing because it points to the importance of language in what we do now as marketers. So you have to not be shy and ask for that clarification. If somebody is saying something negative about automation, right? Well, what type of automation do you mean, right? And get to the bottom of that, because the flip side of it is there's some amazing automation happening out there, and the wave of this year's kind of buzzworthy kind of phrase du jour is data science. And there is just a fascinating number of things that are now being done by algorithms and computers that we could never have imagined. The one that just, raised my eyebrows at the beginning of this year was the fact that AP, the Associated Press, has a number of sports and business articles that are now being completely written by algorithms. There is no human intervention whatsoever. And you can understand it in the context of sports and business, where there's a lot of numerical information to be shared, and you know who's won, who scored, etc. But I mean, it's completely automated. That's something I couldn't have even fathomed, even just a couple of years ago. And these were things that even futurists couldn't necessarily imagine in that context. So we have to recognize as marketers that there's a lot of things that we might have thought couldn't be automated that will be in the future. And part of our job is to make sure that the automation has that humanity cooked into it. It has that respect. It has that foresight. Because if we think back to some of the early forms of automation and targeting where there were huge gaffes, I remember when paid search and Google AdWords first came out, and then they did their distribution of AdSense to publishers, and there was an infamous targeting gaffe where there was an article about somebody being viciously murdered and put into a suitcase, and here's an ad for a suitcase company.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Wow.
And that's just something that everybody who was building the product was thinking very optimistically and sunshine and rainbows, and they weren't thinking about the negative implication until it hit. And then obviously they put checks and balances in so that won't happen. We as marketers are going to have to think both that positive and that worst case scenario to shape this. And there will be gaffes along the way as we seek to automate more. But our job, quickly becomes one to figure out, okay, where does automation make sense? Where do we need the human intervention? And I think you hit upon an important point, and that is, human intervention in social media remains in customer service, because we want to talk to human beings. We want people to help solve our problems. That means the automation applied, say, in social customer service is more along the lines of, okay, this problem came in. I recognize this individual. They're an influencer. We need to escalate this. Hey, let's look at the automation process around our customer service reps. These are the most senior reps on staff. Here's somebody who has experience with the problem this person is experiencing. Let's map those two things together and get this person on the call. And it does that within milliseconds. That's aspirationally where we're headed, and why marketing and service remain or are increasingly connected, because you can do all the great advertising in the world, but if your customer service falls down, it will tank no matter what kind of spend you put in the marketplace.
No doubt. And I completely agree that the automation that's coming is going to be exciting. What we have today is nothing to what is going to be in the future. And it's exciting just to think about the fact that we might be driving a Tesla that might be taking us on and off the freeway without us having to drive. It's really just a crazy time where
I love
the depend.
I sense your excitement about the self-driving car. Let me try and blow your mind a little bit on that, because I wrote an article about that a couple of years ago for Media Post's travel column.
Okay.
So everybody's been focused on the self-driving car and has been concerned more about the road safety issues. I look at it as a frequent traveler, right? I don't rent cars in England or Australia or places where they drive on the other side of the road out of a safety issue. In fact, I was in New Zealand just about a month ago, and my local rep was sharing the fact with me that they had something like 18 fatalities just that summer from foreign tourists coming in and driving on the wrong side of the road. So an automated car fixes that problem. However, what it also does is it frees up the wandering traveler to just rent a car that has this self-driving feature. And now think about what Google can monetize in that car. They could have, basically a 360-degree camera array, both inside and outside the car. And there could be people working from their home office who are tour guides, who are familiar with the whole area, who are on demand or can provide guided tours and take you literally off the beaten path. And then think about what Google can do in terms of restaurant recommendations, shopping recommendations, all of these types of things. That kind of blows my mind. It turns Google search into a physical manifestation in the car and then creates an entirely new economy around that experience for tourists that, currently would be, maybe a little trepidatious, a little afraid about going out on their own, driving on a different side of the road, or even if it was the same type of driving mechanism, going into places that they're not familiar with. Right. That's the type of just mind-blowing possibility that exists with some of these new products that are not too far on the horizon.
I know. And it's amazing just to sit back and enjoy it and experience it. And, we are living near the Back to the Future times. We don't have flying cars yet. We don't got the hoverboard. But
actually you do.
Cool.
You do.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
There was a company that just got funded to the tune of $500 million.
I heard about that.
For building a hoverboard this year. Nike is coming out with their second edition of the I think it's the what was it, the Air Max or whatever the Back to the Future shoe, but it was the self-lacing function is going to be in the shoe this year, and I think it's October 21st is the day they truly went back to the future in the second movie. It was October 21st, 2015. So it's fascinating. I actually do a presentation about how marketers and product developers are making science fiction reality, and it's becoming this strange thing where we're basically taking our cues from the movies that predicted what the future would be. Right.
Yeah, we're like kind of living through their ideas as creators, which is really interesting as well, because there's a lot of people that are creating cool movies right now that 20 years from now will be thinking, how to create that, So we're going to go into Enter Your Mindset. These are going to be some B-realisms. These are some short feedback, kind of giving us some insight into your day and things like that. So in the perfect world, where would you wake up to work?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't think I would make it a place. I would just say, in a perfect world, I'd wake up with my family. As somebody who does a lot of business travel, that's the one thing that I think business travelers and musicians have in common is they both want to write really bad songs about being on the road, because that loneliness or that disconnected feeling you can get even in the best of places, because you want to share it with the people that you love. So I think the idea of just waking up somewhere with the family would be great. And of the places we've been, London is a place that my family uniformly loves. Nice. We're also big fans of the Big Island in Hawaii. And we also, my wife and I just got back from Melbourne, which is just a wonderful city, wonderful people down there. But again, the place doesn't so much matter as long as it's the people that you care about are around you.
So true. So true. Family is everything. And if you don't have them, hold them tight to you, because at the end of the day, life is short and we have to be thankful for every moment. Mm-hmm. So let me say this. How would you say you like to start your day?
Boy, there too, because the business travel, it's interesting. It ebbs and flows. I don't have like a regular schedule oftentimes. It depends on if I'm coming or going or I'm in a home office. I will say this, though. The thing that makes me feel the most human and the most sane in the world is a really nice hot shower to start the day.
Nice.
So that's probably the number one thing. And that's also beneficial for all the people around me in my life. So that's good.
So true. As I've been in many a corporate board meeting, and I'm wondering, did anyone take a shower today?
Indeed.
So tell us, and this is always kind of a hard one, but everyone has their weakness. Can you tell us what is one of your weaknesses?
I think that for as extroverted that you need to be in my role and being on stage, I think when I get off the road, I can become very insular and introverted. And especially in a home office environment, you have to break through that, and you have to be able to reach out to folks. And that's something that I recognized is something that I kind of atrophied around because my schedule had gone so crazy. I mean, I've been traveling for the last couple of years well into the 120,000, 130,000 miles in the air, let alone some of the road trips that I do in a car. And so that allowing yourself to become kind of insular and isolated is probably that weakness, and I'm conscious of it. Being conscious of it is a big thing, and then trying to reach out to friends, to family, to schedule things when you're home, as opposed to just what are we going to do tonight? Oh, let's order in, and let's pop down in front of the TV. So that becomes very important. That kind of planning and connecting with people, whether they're here locally or whether it's by phone with friends all across the globe.
I completely agree. That's just one of those things that, if you don't plan, it's just going to pass you by. And I love what you said just about, that's a weakness of everybody. Having a plan every day is very important. And if part of that plan is to connect to your family and friends, and making it a priority, those are the things that you're going to take serious. And it's one of those things myself. I like to try to push myself to maybe, do an extra lunch or, do a podcast or something interesting where I get to really talk to somebody, because you get insights from someone that maybe you don't even know. It's like talking to a stranger and getting these amazing insights that maybe change your life forever. So now we're going to flip side. Now tell us, Jeffrey, what is one of your biggest strengths?
I think it's probably my creativity. I love getting a problem or a challenge to solve in business and noodling about that. Be it something that just comes up in conversation when I'm speaking with clients, or be it something that a peer or a boss, within our organization, puts in front of me. Working towards a solution for a challenge. Sometimes there's not a singular solution, but having that thing on the horizon that you're working towards really motivates and brings out that creativity in me. And, that ability to motivate towards a goal, I think, is probably one of the key strengths that I have.
And honestly, there's not very many people in the world that have it. To be honest with you, the more and more people I run into, I realize that there's very few people that are actually creative, even in marketing and advertising, that really think for themselves and build their own audience like you've done, and now have a book and all these cool facets that you have to your life. You're traveling around the world, influencing and also impacting people's lives with your message that you have to share for them too. And I just really commend you for doing that and putting in those hard leg work on the road, and ultimately I know that your influence has changed a lot of people's lives.
Well, it's a great honor. I kind of almost look at it as the flip side. The ability to see and speak with marketers and brands around the globe and bring to them, kind of these commonly held concerns. I think there's a lot of kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in marketing right now. One of the first things that people will tell me is, "Oh, we're so far behind," and that's true no matter what continent I'm on. So it can't be that everybody's so far behind. It has to be that the reality is a lot is changing. And so to be able to have that empathy and bring that perspective to them is a really cool part of my job, because it gets them to take the deep breath and say, it's not you, it's this period of time. So put those fears and that uncertainty off to the side and get working, get excited.
Right.
Connect with your customers. And, if I can be a catalyst for that, that's very, very cool. But I very much consider it to be, kind of that I'm the one who's honored by the fact that I'm getting invited, to speak in these places and get to talk to these brands and these folks who are doing such great work.
It's a win-win. And you get that, I know from just speaking, you get that energy that you just feel that and then also vice versa, from the crowd and from the people that you meet and connections and the maybe knowledge that they give you as well from their brand perspective, that it helps you for your next future decisions. It's just that two-way street that there's nothing like that physical conversation. So awesome. Okay. So let's dive into one last one. Now I want you to give us your best advice that you feel like you've ever received.
Wow. That's
a hard one.
That is a hard one. I'll give you one funny one that immediately comes to mind. And I can't remember if it was a grandfather who gave me this advice or a wisecracking uncle. But he said, before you marry a girl, take her swimming so everything washes off and you can see who she really is. I thought that was it might be slightly misogynistic, but it was very funny in the context. And I lucked out in terms of the marriage connection that I made. As for other advice, this wasn't so much advice as it was a motivator. When I was a lawyer and I was very frustrated and I was very young, it was my first quote unquote real job. I just knew it wasn't for me. And yet I heard everybody around me saying, oh, with a law degree, you can do so much. And I'd always follow that up and I'd say, like, what? and inevitably that kind of stopped people in their tracks. But the fact that that phrase, you can do so much, kept coming back, it almost turned into advice for me. It turned into this, belief that, yes, I have a law degree, but that doesn't mean I have to practice, and that's okay. And so that became, kind of a motivating factor to think about, okay, what do I like? And I like technology, and I had gotten a master's in mass communication and finished up the program in 1994 when we were using this thing called the internet. And, I had classes on the internet and developing CD-ROMs and stuff. And so I knew technology was interesting. And so I began to chart a course towards that. And so, again, maybe it wasn't any sort of advice that people gave me, but the notion of following your passion, the notion of, being fearless in doing things. And also, I think I also gained an internal knowledge that if a project or an idea keeps coming back to me and gnawing at me, then I need to go do that regardless of whether it's for work or not. So in my life, I've written several screenplays. I entered them into competitions, but, produced a short film with a director up in Toronto. It made $0. It actually cost me a lot of money to make, but it was a sense of accomplishment. And then if you look at the book, it was this gnawing sense that we did all this great work with subscribers, fans, and followers, and I have these ideas and things. I would have such regret if I looked back that I hadn't written and committed that to paper and shared the ideas with other people. And so that combination of, following your passion, but then also let those little voices inside of you, give you advice or give you motivation to move forward. I mean, if you are still and can listen to those voices, they can be very, very helpful in helping you make decisions.
It's so true. We have all the answers. We just have to listen. And if it's not from us, it'll be from someone else. I mean, one of the best ideas I ever had was because I was sitting with my buddy at Starbucks, and I just listened to what he said. He said, hey, people are going to need their Facebook pages managed. Mm-hmm. And a huge light bulb came off. Oh, ding. There's real-time outsource. Yep. And it wasn't my idea. It was just me listening. And I always tell that to everybody. And it's the same thing with your own self. You just have to listen to what you are feeling. And sometimes you have to pay the bills. Sometimes you have to get, do a job to do a job and get paid. But at the end of the day, there's also this passion burning inside of everybody. And if you're willing to not be afraid, like you mentioned in the beginning, to jump out and embrace it. And really, I like to say, be real with yourself and take yourself seriously and not think of what other people want you to be, but really think about who you want to be. So I really appreciate your passion. And we're going to get into our final, we call it the hot seat. This is going to be where you share some phenomenal resources and some real talk answers. And I really appreciate your time today because you've given us just this passion that I'm going to even take some of this and listen to the podcast again and really sit down with my team and say, hey guys, listen to my man, Jeffery. He's got some stuff that, is going to take our campaigns to the next level, I feel like.
Excellent. Ready for the hot seat.
Absolutely. So be real. If you could sit down today and have lunch with anyone in the world, who would it be?
I would probably say President Barack Obama.
Nice.
It's an obvious answer for a lot of folks, but when you look at someone who has been a two-term president, faced a Congress that has been just downright malicious to any of the initiatives they had. And he still has, a couple of years here to go with his term. It would just be intriguing to understand what he's learned about the role, what surprised him. I saw, in the press just last week that he wishes he would have closed Gitmo sooner. So to understand where the regrets are, where he still wants to seize upon the bully pulpit, and ultimately understand where what he wants to do as he moves back into private life. I have a feeling he's going to be akin to kind of a Jimmy Carter or a Bill Clinton in terms of being very visible in his private life, but around the initiatives and things of which he's passionate about. So an obvious answer, but boy, a conversation I'd relish.
I love it. And I honestly love President Barack Obama's charm and charisma. And I love that he builds in that confidence and personality just by showing that off when he's with the interviews with the press. I was watching one that he was on Jimmy Kimmel not too long ago. And it's just like, you feel this just connection to him because he feels like real to you. He does real things. He listens to Kanye West and, he just feels real in some cases.
I'm not sure if listening to Kanye West is an indication of being real, but I will say this though. To people who didn't vote for him and who are on the other side of the aisle, some of those things come across as, fake or infuriating. And I think that's another thing that intrigues me. And I'd be interested in talking to him, because to be in the public eye and to be a public servant means that you're really signing up for a world in which there's going to be a good percentage of the population who's never going to give you a fair shake. I don't care if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. And that is a hard thing to take for ego. And so, how do you handle that and put it in its proper place and still listen to ideas on the other side and still, take into consideration the thoughts and feelings of folks who will never give you a fair shake. That's a really interesting conversation. So.
And I'd like to be the fly on the wall in that conversation.
Oh, you're welcome. We'll invite you along.
Nice. So tell us, do you have a favorite tool like Buffer or HootSuite that you like to use on a daily basis?
I looked at that question and, I was just thinking about, what I mostly use, and I use a lot of just native apps these days, in part because the way I approach my own social media is meant to be very handcrafted and in the moment and not automated. That's a benefit to a degree that I have from, being in an organization such as Salesforce, where the weight of social media doesn't fall on my shoulders. I'm a contributor, I'm a thought leader, and if you look at my Twitter stream, you see it's an interesting mix of marketing and a little bit of politics, a lot of English Premier League football. I'm a big fan of soccer over there, and
nice.
And again, some folks curate their stuff a little bit differently, and it might seem odd from a guy who wrote a book about audience, but I have made the personal decision that when it comes to those outward facing things, I tend to be very in the moment, and I don't want to automate a lot. And so from a tool standpoint, I tend to use most of the native applications these days. Beyond that, though, I was trying to think of where else do I spend a lot of my time in my mobile device, and there's a lot of different news site kind of mobile apps that I'm into. I spend way too much time in United and Hilton's apps, navigating flights and other types of information. And so, I think part of my quest in 2015 is to be wowed by some new mobile app. I didn't get caught up in the whole Meerkat thing at South by, and it looks like that was probably a wise move, with Twitter kind of cutting them off and then acquiring Periscope. Right. So, yeah, I'll be intrigued to hear some recommendations from your listeners. And obviously, Jay Baer, whom I co-host the Social Pros podcast with, is always a good source for some of those as well.
Absolutely. It's the cool part about the world we live in is there are new opportunities and people developing apps right now in a warehouse, in an office, in a home basement, and they are trying to be the next WhatsApp. They're trying to be the next big app, and they might really be, and it's just amazing that you have this new technology where people can build things that can change the world, and they're doing it from a very small, humble place.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful place we live in. So tell us this also, would you have a favorite book? Do you listen, or do you like to, physically read a favorite book that you could share with our audience that we, feel like that would change their lives?
I have a number of different books that I really like. I'm about to head out on a spring break, and I was reminded of one that I read last spring break called what is it? 18Q4, which is I'm going to butcher the author's name unless I Google it here. But it's a fascinating read, a long read. Oh, it's 1Q84. I superimposed that, but it's by Haruki Murakami, and it is. I don't even want to really explain it. It's kind of a reality warping kind of narrative fiction that I really enjoyed, and I just picked up another book there, Colorless, by the same author that I'm looking forward to reading. But as I kind of looking back on my bookshelf, my wife just got me a original edition of A Prayer for Owen, Meany, and that was a really meaningful book to me. As I was growing up, it was recommended by a friend, and it's John Irving, and I just absolutely love and adore that book. And in terms of what's on my reading list here, I've got The Content Code by Mark Schaefer, a good friend, and he just came out with his book, and so I'm bringing that with me on the cruise. And as I reach into my bag, because I picked this up as well, Charlene Lee's new book came out, The Engaged Leader, A Strategy for Your Digital Transformation. So basically taking a number of marketing or leadership types of books and then a little bit of fiction with me. So you're catching me right before I read a whole bunch, and I'll have a whole bunch of new recommendations.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing those resources. And The Engaged Leader, that sounds very interesting. And The Content Code by Mark Schaefer, off the hook. That is great. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. I'm going to ask you one last thing. Can you give us one last real talk thought, and how can our listeners get a hold of you?
Sure. So to punctuate the concepts of my book, proprietary audience development is now a core marketing responsibility. You can't defer that to anybody else. Your competitors are out there building direct audiences through email and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and text messaging and community platforms. And you've got to be thinking right now, how are you going to do that? How is your audience going to be bigger, more engaged, more valuable in the future? And it's not a campaign. It is an ongoing responsibility. So make sure your team is rallying around that, and it's the whole of marketing, because if your advertising is just out there and merely punctuating commercials with a hashtag that's on screen for less than a second, that is not audience development. You've got to get more integrated and more thoughtful about that to really wrestle the value out of it. And in terms of connecting with me, best way is really Twitter. I am at JK Rohrs, so JKROHRS on Twitter. And if you're interested in learning more about the book, you can go to audiencepro.com.
Well, you have been hanging out with Jeffery K. Rohrs and Travis Too Tall Huff. I want to thank you guys for your time, and always keep being real.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by realtimeoutsource.com, your social media management service for success.